Hello and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the vlog, and welcome back to us talking about science fiction, because last night I was in bed and I was having a bit of a trouble sleeping. I was like, this ceiling's very ceiling-y. So I got on my phone and I was like, okay, let's get the phone out, let's go on to Amazon, let's go on to Netflix and see what's going on. Well, Amazon, it turns out, has a new Star Trek series, and I'm like, yes, Star Trek, I love Star Trek, here's a tricorder, that's fun. So I looked up Star Trek and I was like, Lower Decks, brilliant, I'll give that a shot. It's animated TV series, and then I watched it and I was disappointed because basically what it is Star Trek. It's improvised Star Trek, but they forgot they were doing Star Trek, so they improvised this sketch, and it is kind of arse, really. It's not very good. I don't know who it's aimed at, sort of who the target audience are. Probably teenagers, maybe? People who haven't seen the original series of Star Trek, so OG, TNG, DS9, Voyager, that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like Rick and Morty in space, kind of like Paradise PD in space, kind of like Brickleberry in space. It's not Star Trek. So I was like, well, I'm disappointed. What else is there? Yeah, I mean, the Star Trek Discovery, but that's kind of like a teenager's Twitter feed. It's all drama and time travel. And if you ever wanted to write a good story, you never ever do time travel. Never do time travel. Take time travel out of your story and then stick it right up your ass, because time travel is the story writing equivalent of everyone wakes up and it was all a dream. And then the reader is disappointed, or the viewer is disappointed, because everything they've been doing for the last however long it took them to read the story or watch the story is completely undone. So time travel, not very good. Star Trek Discovery, not very good. Drama, too much of it. Science, not enough of it. There is an episode in season 2 of Star Trek Discovery where they get a quantum torpedo lodged in the hull of their starship, inside the armor. Because the armor is on the outside, the hull is inside the hull is a nice soft squishy bit, you know, where the decks and all the people are. And throughout the entire episode they're like, oh no, if the torpedo explodes we'll lose half the saucer section. Okay, cool. The saucer section. Come to me, Voyager. Okay, so that's really dusty. Voyager, here we go. Saucer section is this bit here. Engineering section's this bit here. Nacelles, these bits on the side. You need 2 of them or 4 of them. You need a symmetrical number of nacelles in order to create a warp field. I'm not gonna get into it, but basically they got a torpedo wedged in the hull, in the saucer section. And they spent the entire episode saying, oh no, if it goes off we're gonna lose half the ship. Alright, cool. So it was essentially like Data's Day. There were two characters and they were trying to disarm this thing. They couldn't do it, and by the end of the episode, one of them has a really good idea. They close a door inside the saucer section, and once the door's closed, everything's safe, and then the torpedo blows up and it just goes poof. And I'm like, should have still taken out half the ship there, lads. It gives one of the characters, one of the actual actors, a good send-off, I guess, but in reality, the science doesn't check out. You'd still lose half the ship if you detonated a torpedo inside it. You can try that these days by taking any sort of regular naval vessel and detonating a torpedo inside it. I should imagine the whole thing would sink. I mean, don't try that, that's highly illegal, but the science backs it up. I'm going to put this back a sec. Yeah, got a foot pedal down there. It's push to talk. Why would you not have push to talk? So, yeah, Star Trek Discovery, it's kind of meh. Looks great, looks fantastic. I'm going to guess ILM do the graphics for it, or at least it's an ILM-inspired graphics. So there's lots of pew-pew lasers and explosions and stuff, which is fine. But pew-pew lasers and explosions aren't really Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek is going to brave new worlds, exploring new life and new civilization, and coming up with new and interesting ways of doing things, not shooting stuff in the face and then being sad about it. So yeah, I don't really know what I'm supposed to get from Discovery other than it's kind of not Star Trek. Speaking of not Star Trek Enterprise is another series you can kind of avoid. It starts off with time travel. Again, it was all a dream. I think basically when sci-fi writers or writers of television shows, especially Californian writers of television shows, come along and they're like, we have this canon, we have this back history, we have these backstories, we have all this information, but we need to write new and interesting stories. How do we do it? And they're like, well, I don't want to touch the canon, so let's just do time travel. All right, yeah, we can have our own universe, we can have our own pocket dimension, we can have all this stuff, but it doesn't mean anything. So you watch it and it doesn't matter whether it goes on 2 seasons or 20 seasons. You know in the back of your mind that what you're watching is not really going to matter because the canon has not been affected. The canon of that universe, that fictional work has not been affected. So, what would I recommend instead? Well, I wouldn't recommend the Star Wars trilogy 7, 8, and 9, the Disney trilogy, because that is a hot mess as well. They managed to write a trilogy without anyone thinking at the beginning, we should write all 3 films together and have like an overarching storyline. So they're out. Rogue One, I have a poster of it above my computer. In fact, I have a canvas of it. That's a canvas. Definitely Rogue One is in the contention. The Mandalorian TV series for Star Trek. Star Trek? Why do I keep saying Star Trek? That's going to upset someone. Star Wars. There was a star and then the end kind of fell apart. So yeah, Solo, a Star Wars story? There we go. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and The Mandalorian, obviously set in Star Wars universe. The Mandalorian of all 3 is probably the best if you want an episodic TV series. I would highly recommend The Mandalorian, absolutely. Mwah. If you want Star Trek, well, in order to watch more Star Trek, you're probably going to have to go and watch the original series Blu-ray version, because what they've done is they've taken the original series, they have upped all the resolutions, cleaned everything up. In some scenes, they've added backdrops, they've added new hero shots of the Enterprise as it flies past. They've done it in such a way that is sympathetic with all the rest of the footage. They've done some subtle things like cleaned up the colors of the phasers. The phasers on the ship are blue instead of red because they kind of switched between episodes. Star Trek The Next Generation, again, the Blu-ray series, everything is much higher res because they originally shot it on cinema quality film. So they've taken all the original film negatives and upscaled everything for, well, no, you don't need to upscale for Blu-ray. It is already Blu-ray compatible. So they've taken everything. You can now see the Enterprise in non-fuzzy vision, so it's actually sharp and beautiful. The stories in The Next Generation are, well, they go between kind of a little bit weird to absolutely brilliant, best of both worlds, absolutely brilliant. You've got that. You've got Deep Space Nine, obviously, for Star Trek. Deep Space Nine, another brilliant TV series. And then you've got Voyager, and I think Voyager is about where Star Trek ends. So Voyager goes back to discovering new life and new civilizations as Voyager travels home, and it is great. I mean, how can you go wrong? It's a little bit heavy on the science and science babble, and they do use a lot of science to get around problems. But honestly, I would take sciencing the way out of a situation rather than shooting stuff in the face and then putting it up on Twitter that you're sad any day of the week. So there's that. Obviously Star Trek's and the Star Warses, but then you've got to go a little bit of, you've got to take a step off the beaten path. Babylon 5, for example. Babylon 5 is 5 seasons, and it was written as 5 seasons, and all of the characters were given trapdoors so that if an actor wanted to leave, they could. It looks like a 90s television show. It was all filmed in widescreen, but then all the actors are kind of bunched up in the middle of the screen because it was going to be shown on 4:3 pan scan screens. But honestly, you can look past that. There is a little bit of time travel in there. I think Babylon 4 turns up, one of the missing stations, but then it gives you a great example of a ghost ship episode. So it's not a bad thing. Then you've got things like Cowboy Bebop. If you do have Amazon Prime, Cowboy Bebop is definitely something to watch. I love it. It's another 90s sci-fi, but it's animation, and it's a great example of how animation can be done well. It's Japanese, and yeah, it is It uses a lot of real-life sciences, so it has jump gates, which if you've ever played the Freelancer games, you'll know exactly how those ships are traveling around. It has very, very good character development, and it's a realistic and interesting sci-fi. But if you want something a little bit more modern, well, I think best sci-fi, there are two best sci-fis. My two candidates for best sci-fi in recent times are the podcast Mission to Zix. I gotta say, the podcast Mission to Zix is probably my fix for sci-fi at the moment. It is brilliant, it's well thought out, it's still improvised, but it's done in such a way that it feels like it's been written really, really well. Certainly produced really well, and there's a lot of audio enhancements and sound mixing that goes on. It is such a good podcast. My other candidate is going to be another animated TV series, and it's called Final Space, and it's on Netflix. Now, if you've never seen Final Space, and you start with episode 1, you'll start with a protagonist called Gary, and Gary is not that likable, especially not in episode 1. But it is one of those things that's written over the entire course of the season. So the season is already written before they start making each of the episodes, and he gets more and more likable as it goes on, and it introduces more and more characters, and when things happen to the characters, they stay happened. If something happy happens, it stays happened. If something sad happens, it stays happened. And it builds up to this huge crescendo at the end of season 1, and then season 2, they've obviously been given a lot more money, and they've put it back into the show. And it shows. Season 2, they just kick the doors off straight away. It is perfect sci-fi. I love Final Space, and I'm really, really looking forward to season 3. Honorable mentions? Are there any honorable mentions? Well, yeah, I mean, if you're really, really looking for something that is completely bonkers, then you have to go back to the 90s, and you have to go and start looking at Lex. Lexx, Lex. So Lex is what happens when Canadians and Germans make sci-fi, but there's no moral flaw to it. You can tell it was made on a budget. The graphics and everything are very, very dated. But if you can look past that, the stories are actually kind of interesting. No, the first season is 4 films. That was it. The first season is 4 films. Second season is Monster of the Week. Third season, they are syndicated, and they start having an overarching storyline. And then season 4, they end up on Earth and eat Holland. So Holland, or the Netherlands, gets eaten, and America nukes itself. So yeah, if you really want a sci-fi that is completely pants on head bonkers, then Lex is your go-to sci-fi. If you want something that's good, Cowboy Bebop, the OG Star Warses, OG Star Treks, everything up to and not including Enterprise, because Enterprise can go and eat one. And yeah, Final Space and Mission to Zix are 2 of the latest and most interesting sci-fis out there, in my humble opinion. And it is just my opinion. I mean, don't take that as gospel anything. If you watch Star Trek Lower Decks and you go, oh, this is for me, then congratulations, you're the audience. But I tell you what, I am going to go and make dinner. Probably not with my tricorder, but I'm going to go and make dinner, whatever. So I'm going to get all this encoded, uploaded, and all that sort of lovely stuff. I will see you guys next time. We are working on Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm working on new backgrounds and stuff for that. So that's been occupying all my time this week. So if you're like, oh, where are your videos? Well, I've been busy in Photoshop, old chums, and I will probably be busy for a little bit longer. Until then, like the video if you want to help the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to help the channel, and I'll tell you what, I'll catch you next time.